I turned the key to enter my dingy apartment. I sat on the foot of my bed and took my work boots off. I work as a parking lot attendant for the Miami Dolphins at Hard Rock Stadium. It was a Sunday night game, so I did not get home until late in the evening. Just as I was about to grab a beer from my fridge and wind down for the evening, my phone started to buzz in my pocket. I picked it up and the name read Charlene Kramer. That's a name that I haven't heard since I moved from Wyoming down here to Florida. I let it go to voicemail. My phone buzzed again, alerting me of a new voicemail. I put it on speaker and began to listen to it. Bobby. It's Mom. I'm sorry to inform you, but your grandpa has passed away. The funeral will be in a couple of days. I hope that you can make it. I love you. She sounded a little sad, but mostly stern like she always is. I just lay there in my bed and started crying. I moved so far away from my grandpa, who I loved and adored, and I was never going to see him again. I checked my account on my phone and I had just enough to buy a round-trip flight, a rental car, and stay at a motel. I booked the next flight and began to pack. I can't believe I was going back home. A place I never thought I'd have to return to. I began to pack, starting with my best suit that I owned. It's the suit I had worn to my high school graduation. Luckily it still fit. Then a bunch of t-shirts and a pair of jeans and a few pairs of shorts just to get me through the next few days. I even packed a Wyoming Cowboys hat that Grandpa had given me from the last game that we watched together. I was still in shock that he was gone, and I feel guilt for not going back sooner. I had no idea that he was even sick. I laid down just to get a little bit of rest, but it never came because my mind was racing all night long. As I looked out my window, I saw the night turn to day. Maybe I could get some sleep on the plane, but probably not. Right along with Grandpa's passing, I'm also financially strapped for cash. This will officially deplete me down to almost zero in my account. I also had to call my boss and let him know that I would not be available for a week. Luckily, he was cool enough to give me bereavement and a week's pay wired into my account come Friday. I grabbed my luggage and drove to the airport after sitting for a couple of hours. I was finally able to board my plane to go back home. When I landed, I instantly went to the rental car center and got me the cheapest car that I could find. They had a 2013 Toyota Corolla on the lot that looked like it was held together with duct tape and thoughts and prayers. To me, it might as well have been a Rolls Royce. I drove it straight to the motel I booked, which was only $30 a night. After I got situated, I decided to bite the bullet and drive to my mom's house. Being such a small family, it was really only my mom and I that were grieving the loss of my grandpa. Former co-workers on the oil fields would come in like a revolving door, but they wouldn't stay long. I had so much tuna casserole that could last me to the end of the year, and every head tilt and condolences eventually fell on deaf ears after about the 15th time. After it was just me and my mom left in the house that evening, we finally had time to talk. "Bobby, it's so good to see you again," Mom told me. There was a pinch of sincerity, but again she was stern through and through. I just looked the other way and said, "Yeah, you too," even though I had zero sincerity. "Where are you staying?" she asked me. "I'm staying at the Motel 6 across town." She did not like that answer and insisted that I stay with her for the week. I told her I already paid in advance for the week, which was a lie, but I didn't think she would know. She just shook her head at me and sighed in disapproval. I told her to try to get some rest and I would see her at the funeral home in the morning. I took a deep breath and walked to the car. She was watching me from the window. On the drive back, I couldn't help but feel like maybe I mistreated my mother. Maybe I could forgive her for what she had done to me growing up. She was so overbearing and a helicopter mom before that was even a term. Everything I did, from how I brushed my teeth, how I walked, and how I cut my food at the dinner table, was always under a microscope. I never really had friends growing up because my mom had a reputation at my school, always calling to see how my grades were, if I performed the mile at an appropriate final time, if there were any girls I was talking to. The receptionist was like a spy for her, and she told her everything I did day to day. I would be in trouble before I even got on the school bus home. I eventually began to drift off while I was driving. Thankfully, the motel wasn't that far away, so I shook it off before I could fully fall asleep. As I walked into my room, I turned the light on and sitting in the chair was Grandpa. Shocked, I felt like I was going to jump out of my skin as I began to hyperventilate. I rubbed my eyes and looked over and he was gone. I must have been really exhausted because now I'm hallucinating. It made sense to me because of the long flight to drive to my mother herself, and getting sympathy from people all day finally caught up with me. I decided it was time for me to get some rest. The funeral was in the morning. As I woke up and brewed myself a cup of coffee from the dinky little coffee maker in my room, I decided it was time to shave, take a long, hot shower, and iron out my suit before wearing it. I grabbed the styrofoam cup and took a sip of what was the worst coffee I've ever tasted in my life. However, I needed the caffeine, so I drank it quickly. I crushed up the cup and threw it in my trash can as I looked over at the chair one last time before walking out the door. I arrived at the funeral home and the only person sitting there was my mom. It was a couple of hours before the funeral, but just seeing her there by herself made me feel a little sad. I sat down next to her when I had the chance and decided to finally ask her the question that's been burning in my mind since I got the voicemail. I sat down next to her and said, "Hey Mom, if you don't mind me asking, how did he die?" As she dabbed the running mascara off of her eyelid, she sniffed and looked at me. The coroner said that his heart gave out. Your grandpa liked to live life on the rough side, and it finally caught up with him. I wasn't sure what she was talking about. Grandpa was always soft and sweet towards me, and I didn't think he had a single rough bone in his body. Though he had worked in the oil fields, I never once saw him have a bad day. I think that was just my mom overanalyzing and thinking that she knows more than she actually does. She's been that way my entire life. She always has to be right, and she always knows best. That was one of the many reasons that I decided to move across the country. After a while of silence, and just sitting there, people started to file in. People that already came by the house and gave me their condolences and casseroles, some new faces, but the whole room was full of people that wanted to celebrate Grandpa. The minister went behind the pulpit and began to give a eulogy. They had asked me and Mom if we wanted to write it, but in our grief, we decided to give it to a professional. Though he didn't attend every Sunday, Grandpa was a member of the minister's church. He was always one of the first people to sign up to feed the homeless on Thanksgiving, stuff backpacks with school supplies for the children's ministry, and always volunteered for Vacation Bible School. He was not only a pillar at his former job, but he was a pillar of his church that would be sorely missed. The eulogy was very touching, and I did cry a handful of times. I just couldn't help but stare at my grandpa in an open casket. I don't think I broke my stare the entire time. After the service, we all caravanned to the cemetery. Grandpa was finally going to be laid to rest. About a quarter of the people that were there met us at the cemetery. As they lowered the coffin into the ground and began shoveling dirt over it, I looked over by a line of trees, and I could have sworn I saw my grandpa standing there. He just had a blank expression on his face, and he had his hand in his coat pocket. I looked away for a moment when somebody asked me a question, and I looked back and he was gone. That's twice now I've seen my grandpa, but I knew that he was in that casket in the ground. We all met back at my mom's house, where friends and neighbors once again brought more casseroles, made iced tea, and would swap stories about my grandpa. Mom had a bunch of old photo albums spread out on the coffee table where people can come and go and look at pictures. As I was thumbing through it, I noticed there were a lot of pictures missing. The missing pictures were of me and Grandpa specifically. She had rearranged the photo albums to make it just pictures of her and Grandpa, and that was it. It's like she erased me from existence with these photo albums. Once again, after everybody left, it was just me and Mom in the house. She was in the kitchen doing dishes after she finished. She came and sat next to me on the couch. "Mom, where are all the pictures of me and Grandpa?" I asked. She just looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Bobby, your grandpa wanted to make his own separate photo album of just pictures of you and him. It was one of the projects that he didn't get to finish before he passed." She slapped her hand on my thigh a few times and got up to make a cup of coffee. I knew she was lying, but I just couldn't prove it. So I told her that my boss had given me a few days of bereavement and that I was just going to go back to the motel and relax for a few days. She once again yelled at me for staying at the motel and not with her. I didn't even let her finish her statement before I walked out the door. As soon as I was leaving, she had texted me. "Since you were so fucking rude, you didn't let me finish my statement. We have a meeting with your grandpa's lawyer at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We are going to be doing the reading of the will. I guess I'll see you there." I slid my phone back in my pocket and couldn't help but throw my head back. I just chalked it up to me jumping to conclusions again and not hearing my mom out. The next morning I arrived at the lawyer's office. My mom was already sitting there waiting for me. "So you did decide to show up?" she said with vinegar on her lips. "Yeah, Mom, this is important to Grandpa." I shot back at her immediately. His lawyer came into the waiting room and told us to follow him into the conference room. It was his turn to give us his condolences. As we sat at a round table, "He was a great man and he will be sorely missed. This piece of paper gives me the opportunity to present his final wishes. Since you two were the only family he had left after your grandmother's passing when you were just a little girl, Charlene, a vast majority of it will go to you. However, there is one item in particular that is to go to Bob. Bob, your grandfather has left you a box. The contents are unknown and attached to the box is an envelope with your name on it. I was directed not to read it and it was for your eyes only." The lawyer shot a glance at my mother as he said that. "You may open this envelope when you are ready, and when it comes to the car, the house, and any of his memorabilia, Charlene, you are in your possession of all of it." He put the piece of paper back in a manila folder and took off his glasses. "Are there any questions?" he asked both of us. "Yeah, I have a question," my mom said. "What's this about the box?" "I've never heard of this box and I feel that I should get it because I got everything else. This little shit left him. Why should he get anything?" I could tell she was enraged because for once in her life, she was not in control of the situation. "Miss Kramer," he said, as he cleared his throat, "this was your father's final wish for Bob. To take that away from him is to take away respect. And I will be damned if respect is not upheld in this office." I could tell he didn't care for my mother very much, and what he said to her put her in her place as she broke eye contact and lowered her head. "Now, if there are no longer any questions, I believe we are done here." He rose from his chair, took the manila envelope and walked out the door. The box was sitting in the middle of the table as Mom and I were staring at it. I decided to make the first move and grab the box. I began to walk out the door and right as I reached for the handle, my mom said, "Where the hell do you think you're going?" I turned and looked at her and said, "I'm going back to the motel room. I'm gonna see what this box is all about." I walked out the door and slammed it for effect. Once again, as I walked out the door, my mother texted me, "It doesn't matter what your grandpa wants, I'm getting that box one way or another." I just rolled my eyes and walked out of the office. I got back to my motel room and expected to see Grandpa again sitting in the chair, but he wasn't there. I placed the box on the desk and stared at it for a little bit. I was too anxious to open the envelope and read what it said. After a little bit, I took a deep breath and bit the bullet. In Grandpa's handwriting it read, "Bobby, I'm leaving you with this box because I trust you with it more than I trust your mother. I always enjoyed the times that we've had, and though you moved across the country, I never once hated you for it. The box is locked, however you can gain the key by going on a scavenger hunt that I have set up. Each spot will have a clue for you. The first clue is within this letter. It is as follows: whether a catfish or a trout. At this spot is where the next clue sits about. I'm more than confident that you can figure out where the next clue is when the scavenger hunt is concluded. I promise you will have everything you need to continue your life and get answers to the questions that you seek. I love you, Bobby. Grandpa." I couldn't help but break down and cry after reading the letter. I read it 2 or 3 times just because I missed him so much. I knew the exact spot he was talking about. He would take me fishing when the weather was appropriate on weekends. I knew just the place, North Platte River. So the next morning I was going to go on a little bit of an adventure. I decided to get some rest. I fell asleep, clutching the note on my chest. The next morning I headed out to the river. I stopped at a gas station to grab me a drink and a 100-gram chocolate bar. The river wasn't too far from the motel. It was so close, but when it was just me and Grandpa, it felt like we were 1,000,000 miles away from any negative emotions or bad thoughts. I parked and walked to our usual spot and just stared at the water for a little bit, having flashbacks of Grandpa and me fishing. At one point I did catch a catfish. It was the highlight of any of our trips. I bragged about it to Grandpa every single time. I chased the high every single time we went, but didn't ever come close. Grandpa would always ask me if he could get me anything. My response was always the same. How about 100 grand? The first time I said it was to be a smartass, however. Every single time he would ask me, I would give the same answer. After that, he would always just hand me a 100 grand chocolate bar. I pulled it out of my jacket pocket and ate it while I was thinking of better times. There was a tree directly behind me that was hollowed out. I thought that would have been the prime spot for the next clue, and I was correct as I reached into the tree. I pulled out a Ziploc bag with another piece of paper in it. I unfolded it and read it. It said, "Congratulations on finding the first clue, Bobby. Here is the next one for you. The next place once gave you a toothache. It might have been from their famous milkshakes. I'm sure you know exactly where I'm talking about. Love, Grandpa. Johnny J's." I knew it right when he mentioned the toothache. Mom was pissed when she had to take me to the dentist to fix that cavity. As I remembered that moment, I turned to the riverbed, and there he was. Grandpa was standing at his usual spot. He vanished within seconds, but not before he craned his neck to look at me. I sniffled and shook it off. It was about lunchtime anyway, and only a 10-minute drive. Time to get another toothache, if I'm lucky. A brief drive later, and I felt like I traveled back in time. I pulled into a parking spot and immediately walked in. Our usual booth was open, so I asked to sit there. I walked over and sat down. I looked down at the menu, and it luckily hadn't changed at all. "What can I get for you?" I heard from a familiar voice. I looked up, and it was Tammy. She would always serve Grandpa and me. I looked at her and said, "Tammy? It's me, Bob. You used to serve my Grandpa and me every time we came in." I saw her eyes light up as she gave me a hug. "Hey, Bobby, it's so great to see you. I'm sorry to hear about your Grandpa. I had to work during his service. Otherwise, I would have been there." I assured her that it was okay, and that I shared the same sentiment in seeing her. I asked her for my usual. She just chuckled and said, "Glad some things never change." She brought me a burger with fries and their famous chocolate marshmallow milkshake. "Now don't go and get another toothache on me." I rolled my eyes and chuckled as I dipped one of my fries in the shake. It was as heavenly as I remembered. "Oh," Tammy exclaimed. "I saw your Grandpa a few weeks ago, and he gave me this." She handed me a folded up piece of paper. I thanked her and began to read. "I hope you're enjoying the milkshake, Bobby. Here is the final clue to where to find the key. From the roar of the crowd, when these buckaroos score, it gets loud. No matter what you do, be sure to ask for Lou. Grandpa would take me to see the Wyoming Cowboys play almost every home game. Once again, I knew exactly where to go." I thanked Tammy and gave her a hug right along with a $50 bill for the meal and her tip. She told me to take care of myself as I headed off to my final stop. As soon as I got to the front door, I looked over at the booth, and their Grandpa was sitting on his usual side. Once again, he vanished pretty quickly after that. Even though it was about 5 hours round trip, I decided to enjoy the ride. I opened Spotify and played songs that Grandpa and I would listen to all the time. We listened to a little bit of everything from Elvis Presley, REO Speedwagon, Deep Purple, Kiss, and Britney Spears. Grandpa thought she was a cutie and added her music into our rotation. The 2.5 hours flew by as I was enjoying every song. When I showed up to the football field at War Memorial Stadium, I walked up to a scrawny old man. He had a broom in his hand and was sweeping the entrance. He looked up, and I asked him, "Excuse me, sir, are you Lou?" He looked at me, kind of puzzled, but nodded his head. "You don't know me, but my Grandpa Hugh Kramer told me to ask for you." I can tell he was a little sad at the mention of Grandpa's name, but he swallowed it and stuck his hand out to shake. "Yes, sir, Your grandpa told me you would be coming back at some point. Let me lead you into the stadium." He stuck his hand in his left pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. He unlocked the iron gate of the stadium and escorted me in. "I'm sure you remember where you and your grandpa sat," Lou said to me as we were walking onto the field. I knew exactly where to go. Grandpa had season tickets and was a proud alumni of the university. He liked to sit at the 50-yard line about midway through the stands. He said it was the best way to experience the game. I walked up those steps and sat there, just staring at the field. I could hear the roar of the crowd, the smell of the nachos, and the band playing their hearts out. It was cathartic as I scanned the field and made my eyes point at the 50-yard line. Their grandpa was standing right in the middle of the logo with his hands in his pockets, looking up at me. He gave me a nod and once again vanished. As soon as that happened, Lou popped in the seat that my grandpa usually sat in and began to speak. "Boy, I sure do miss your grandpa. He and I graduated together. He left for the oil field, and I stayed in the football stadium. However, we never lost touch and I was proud to know him. I'm sure you miss him, and I'm sorry for your loss." I couldn't help but break down and just let it flow. With my elbows on my thighs, I sank my face into my hands. Lou gave me a pat on the back. And when I lifted my head up, he had a key in his hand. "I'm not sure what this is for, but your grandpa made it sound like the most important thing in the world. Here you go." I took it from his hand and thanked him for being so gracious. I had a 2.5-hour drive ahead of me, so I excused myself after I gave him a handshake. Once I got back to my motel room, I opened the box. I put the key in and turned it. It made a clicking sound. I lifted the lid and inside were the missing pictures from the photo albums, letters with dates and my name on them that he never mailed, and taped to the top of the box was another envelope with my name on it. I opened the envelope and inside was another key right along with another letter. "Bobby, a few years ago, I caught your mother throwing these pictures away. We got into a spat about it. I told her just because she throws away the pictures doesn't mean she could throw away the memories. There are also letters in the box. I tried to write you multiple times, but every time I got caught by your mother. Living with her was hell for me after you left. Like I said in the first letter, I'm not mad at you about it. I knew the type of person that your mother is. However, the key that you found in this envelope is a key to a locked box at the bank. There, you will find the final treasure that I have left for you. I'm proud of you, Bobby. You deserve every great thing that comes your way. Love, Grandpa." Not even a second after I read the letter, my mother burst into my motel room. She looked angry as she began to speak. "Bobby, I'm here for the box. I could see that you have opened it. Whatever is in it, I don't care, but you don't deserve anything." I looked at her and stated, "Grandpa left this for me. You don't get to just come in here and take what's not yours. You've taken enough from me in this life, and this is where I stand." As her face began to turn beet red, she reached behind her and pulled out a gun. She pointed it at me and said, "I don't fucking think so. Give me the box or I'll shoot you right here, right now." I once again told her that it didn't belong to her, and that if she was going to shoot me, go ahead. She pulled the hammer back. "You're so goddamn stubborn, just like your grandpa, even right up to the second before I shot him." He told me the same thing. My mother just admitted to me that she killed my grandpa. It wasn't a heart attack, it was murder. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, the gun flew across the room. I knew it was Grandpa intervening. I grabbed my luggage and the box and walked towards my mother, who was now on her knees, screaming and crying. I bent down and said to her, "When I walk out this door, we no longer speak." I walked to the door as she continued to scream, and I slammed it once again for effect. As I was walking through the parking lot, I saw Grandpa once again, but he was leaning up against my car. I got about a foot away from him and he smiled at me. He vanished again, and that was the last time I ever saw him. I drove to the bank for my final surprise. I walked in and showed the teller my key. The bank manager then escorted me to the lockbox. As we both unlocked it, he handed it to me and stepped back to give me time to look it over. When I opened it, there There was a 100-gram chocolate bar sitting on top of a stack of dollar bills that had a band that read $100,000. This was my true inheritance from Grandpa. He finally gave me what I asked for all those years ago. I just smiled as I held the chocolate bar in one hand and my future in the other. I just looked up to the ceiling and said thank you to my grandpa.
As you can see, Mr. Caldwell, we caught your son strung out again in the bathroom at a sorority house. This is twice this has happened, and if it happens again, we're going to have to expel him. Right now he's just suspended for the semester. I suggest you take him home and get him cleaned up before he can ever come back. That is what the dean of the college said to my father. I have used my time at UTEP to party and rarely ever study. This was the second time I had overdosed on heroin at a party. I'm down to one more chance after that I'm permanently kicked out of the university. Since this wasn't Dad's first rodeo, he picked me up from the hospital and drove me home. I decided to leave town to go to college, though I decided to stay in state. My family lives in Arlington, which is about 600 miles away from my college. Just blows my mind how big the state of Texas is. Anyway, I was mostly silent the entire car ride back home. My dad had given me the angry father lecture the time before. I guess it just didn't really stick for me. After a silent car ride, we pulled into the driveway. Dad put his Tesla in park and shut it off. Look, Russ, I love you, but this is the second time you've been caught with drugs. Your mother and I don't pay for your college just for you to waste it away like you're doing. You are to stay in this house until you can sober up. If you fail to do that, then my hands are tied and I will put you in rehab. Do I make myself clear? I slightly rolled my eyes and looked over at him. Yes, Dad, I promise I can do that. I'm sorry that this is the second time you've had to do this. I said it sincerely with a hint of sarcasm. I guess he picked up on it immediately as he got out of the car and grabbed my luggage. He walked in the house with it, but I decided to sit in the car for a few minutes. After I worked up the courage to face my sister and my mom, I got out of the car and walked to the door. My sister Grace immediately met me with a big hug. Rusty, are you okay? She asked with tears in her eyes. I shook my head and rubbed her shoulders. Grace and I are about 4 years apart. She's currently a sophomore, but she has the wisdom of a middle-aged woman. She's always been my biggest cheerleader. She should know, because she's already the head cheerleader of her school. I could hear my mom stomping from the kitchen into the living room with her expensive Louis Vuitton heels. She got about 2 feet from me and stood there with her arms crossed and a look of disappointment on her face. After a few seconds of staring at me, she just rolled her eyes and scoffed. She couldn't stay mad at me as she also met me with a huge hug. Don't you ever scare me like that again, do you hear me? She said as she raised a manicured finger now at my face. I took a deep breath and told her how sorry I was and that I promised it wouldn't happen again. I wasn't sarcastic with her. I was actually sincere. Good. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Go wash up, she told me as she stomped back into the kitchen. I have been out of the house for 2 years, but that didn't stop her from being my mother. I went upstairs and took a quick shower before heading down to dinner. After my shower, I just looked at myself in the mirror, and what I saw looking back at me was a pale and scrawny shell of my former self. I had originally gone to school to play baseball, however. I was kicked off the team after my first drug bust. I didn't like what I saw in my reflection, and that was the time I told myself I've had enough. I was gonna get sober. I was gonna get clean, and I was gonna make something of myself. As I walked back down the stairs, I could smell dinner. Mom had made a family staple. Grilled barbecue pork chops, mac and cheese, green beans, and a dinner roll. I instantly was taken back to childhood. Simpler times even, and that is a place that I would go back to if I have the chance. To just rewind the clocks and start fresh with what I know now. I would take that 10 times out of 10. I sat down in my usual spot as Mom already prepared my plate along with a glass of milk. She looked up at me as she was cutting into her pork chop and smiled. Grace did the same, except she was sitting on my right as she took her hand and put it in mine and patted it. Dad didn't look up once. That was until about halfway through dinner. He clinked his fork off of the side of the plate and put his hands up to his chin. "All right, Russ, now that you're here, I think I can lay down some of the ground rules. You are to stay in this house at all times. If you leave the property once, game over. If I catch you doing anything suspicious, you're done. Finally, your mother and I will be leaving at the end of the week for me to speak at a medical conference. We would have canceled, but since I'm the keynote speaker, I couldn't get out of it. So I am trusting you to take care of not only Gracie, but the house for the weekend. Once again, do I make myself clear?" I just gave him a simple, "Yes, sir," and looked back down to fork a few shells of the mac and cheese. He picked his fork up and began to eat once more. "You know, Rusty, I think it would be a good idea for you to keep a journal or something. Somebody to talk to that's not me, your father, or your sister," Mom said with a little bit of encouragement in her voice. I told her it was a great idea and asked her if she could pick me up a composition notebook when she goes grocery shopping tomorrow. She smiled and shook her head in agreement. I then asked my dad if we still had the weights and the bench in the garage. He told me it was no longer in the garage because he had to make room for Grandpa's 1967 Cadillac. However, the bench and the weights were behind the shed now. I told him that I was going to start lifting weights again to get my strength back. He thought it was a great idea and encouraged it. After dinner, Gracie and I did the dishes together. I washed and she dried. As she was washing off a plate, she looked at me and said, "You know I believe in you, don't you?" I just glanced over at her and smiled. "You always have, Gracie, and I thank you for that," I said to her as I was getting a little choked up. "Do you want to watch an episode of Criminal Minds after we do the dishes?" she asked with a light in her eyes. We had always watched Criminal Minds every night before bed. I told her that it would mean the world to me if we would do that again while I'm here. So we sat down and watched not one but 3 episodes before we decided to go to bed. The next morning I woke up feeling like I was hit by a truck. I was going through withdrawals badly. Any other time I would break down and call Mitch my dealer. However, he was over 600 miles away and I was going to fight this time. So far that day I just laid in bed and drank a gallon of water and rested when I needed to. My mom came up around lunchtime and gave me not only the composition notebook but the box combo from Raising Cane's. She told me I needed to eat something or I was going to go insane. I figured that it would be better to have food on my stomach instead of just water, so I thanked her for the food and the composition notebook. I had a pen stashed in my bedside table, so I took it out and began to write. Day 2. Yesterday was the first day back home and I didn't have anything to write down my thoughts or anything. So I'm starting this on day 2. Today I not only feel like hammered shit, but I am sweating like a pig in a slaughterhouse, and I can feel my lunch trying to come up the way it came in. However, I am strong. I am loved and I am going to win. Gracie is my anchor, Mom is my motivation, and Dad is Dad. That's all. I have the energy to write for today, so I will write down my thoughts tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm going to get some rest. Rusty. I wrote that down with chicken scratch and immediately went back to sleep. I was out for hours because the thing that woke me was Grace bringing me what Mom had made for dinner. Though my stomach was queasy, I needed to eat. Mom had made steak quesadillas with tortilla chips and chipotle sauce. Another childhood staple. I thanked Gracie for the food and she left me alone to eat. I turned on my TV and browsed to see if there's anything I can watch on streaming. Netflix had all 10 of the Saw movies. So I decided to binge because if I knew anything, I wasn't going to sleep well tonight. My assumption was correct. Insomnia is quite the bitch when it comes to withdrawals. So I stayed up and watched all the way to Saw 4 before I passed out as the sun began to rise. I felt like an uncool vampire, but I was going to take sleep where I could get it. After sleeping for about 3 hours, I finally woke up and decided to jot down another journal entry. Day 3. My stomach feels like it's in knots but also being stressed at the same time. I stayed up all night and watched 4 song movies on Netflix. Mom made quesadillas for dinner last night and I scarfed them down but didn't throw up. I will chalk that up as a win. I'm feeling a little better today, so I think I'll actually go downstairs and pour me a glass of orange juice or something. I hope to start lifting weights sometime this afternoon. We'll just see how I feel. Rusty. I eventually did go downstairs and poured me a glass of orange juice. I walked past the garage where I could see Grandpa's Cadillac next to the jet skis in the garage through the window. As I turned the corner, there was the workout equipment. I popped my AirPods in and switched it to my workout playlist. It mostly contained upbeat, hip-hop, and fast metal. Putting it on shuffle, the first song was Dig by Mudvayne, followed by Cinderella Man by Eminem. I guess muscle memory is real because I was back in business quickly. I was, for lack of a better term, a little rusty. This was my happy place, and I let drugs interfere with my life. Not anymore. Horror movies and good tunes is all I need in life at this moment. After about an hour and breaking a sweat from working out and not withdrawals, I decided to take a long, hot steamy shower. After the shower, I wiped the mirror and looked at my reflection. I could see a glimpse of my former self returning. Not fully there, but progress is progress. After I took a shower, my mom told me to come downstairs and eat lunch with her. When she used to eat lunch with me in the cafeteria at school, she would always bring In-N-Out Burger, double animal style. That's what I had waiting for me at the kitchen table. She took a bite of her burger and glanced over at me. I'm glad to see that you're feeling better. I could hear you lifting weights in the backyard from the kitchen window. That was a sound that I never thought I would hear again. I shook my head at her and smiled. Thank you for the burger. It reminded me of the times that you would bring me food at lunch, I said to her with a full mouth. There is a method to my madness, she said, as she took a drink from her plastic cup. As I finished eating, I excused myself, took my trash, and kissed my mom on the forehead. She playfully waved me off as her bracelets were jingling on her right wrist. She chuckled a bit too. I felt a little tired and went back upstairs. I figured I wouldn't get much sleep tonight either, so I continued my marathon starting with Saw 5, but not before my next journal entry. Day 4. Insomnia is still winning, but that's what I have the television for. Working out today felt phenomenal and I plan on doing the same thing tomorrow. Mom gave me In-N-Out Burger for lunch and it was the happiest I had been in a long time. Affirmation from her keeps giving me motivation to go forward. I'm gonna finish this marathon and try to get a little bit of sleep at some point in the morning. Rusty. As I was sitting there watching William Easton choose between his secretary or the file clerk in Saw 6, I heard a tree branch snap from my window in the backyard. I looked out my window, and I saw something moving along the garage. We had a little bit of light illuminating the yard, but I couldn't make out any features. It just looked like a blob of black. I continued to stare, waiting for something to happen, but after about 10 minutes, the shadow disappeared. I was terrified and frozen, but at the same time I tried to rationalize what I saw. It could have been an animal, or my mind playing tricks on me due to withdrawals. I figured that I would go down for breakfast in the morning and tell my dad what I saw. I didn't sleep at all, but when I heard Mom click-clacking around in her shoes and Dad getting ready for work, I decided to go down and talk to him. Good morning, Dad. I have to tell you about what I saw last night. He looked at me and tilted his head. All right, Russ, what did you see? He said passive-aggressively. I saw a shadow lurking in the backyard around the garage. It was there for about 10 minutes and then it disappeared. That's what I said to him. He looked at me like I was the stupidest person on earth and brushed it off. Russ, you're going through withdrawals. There was no shadow in the backyard. Perhaps you should keep what you say to yourself. It'll just anger me more. He then shut the kitchen door and left for work. I stood there stunned. Just the way he brushed me off so quickly made no sense. Mom just patted me on the back and said, "Come on, Rusty, your biscuits and gravy are getting cold." After breakfast, I lifted weights again. This time in silence. I just had the encounter with Dad playing on repeat like a button was stuck on a remote. I finished my set, took a shower, looked in the mirror and ate lunch. Mom had decided to make me 2 bologna and cheese sandwiches with spicy nacho Doritos. I was back in elementary school again thanks to Mom. Day 5. Dad really upset me today. I came to him worried and he spat in my face. It's like he tunes me out every time I say something to him now. I know what I saw, withdrawals be damned. I'm hoping to get some evidence tonight to show. Rusty. That night I decided to start a Nightmare on Elm Street. However, right when Freddy came out of the walls on my TV, the shadow appeared again in the backyard. Determined, I filmed it with my phone as proof. Again, after about 10 minutes or so, it was gone, but I had the video on my phone. It was crappy quality, but better than nothing, I thought. The next morning I ran downstairs to catch my dad before he left for work. "Dad, look, I caught the shadow on video last night," I said to him as I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I put it in his face and told him to look. He put his hand up and said, "Rusty, what did I tell you about the shadow? Please do yourself a favor and let it go." He didn't even make eye contact with me as he walked out the door. I just didn't get it. I showed Mom and she told me she believed me, but the video quality was too grainy to see a proper shadow. Another workout done and shower taken, I could see muscle begin to form while I was in the bathroom shaving. I was physically returning to normal, but my dad has kept me mentally drained. I just took a deep breath in through my nose as I walked out of the bathroom. Day 6. I just don't know how my dad can get under my skin like that every single time. I come to him with general concerns and he brushes me off just like I'm one of his patients seeking another high. Though he's a psychiatrist, he really doesn't know what's going on inside of his 4 walls outside of the office. Mom tried to believe me, but I still think that she's skeptical. I'm trying to keep it from Gracie so that she doesn't get freaked out. I'll have the house to myself for the most part tomorrow. I'll do my own investigation if I have to. My mind is getting clearer and physically. I think I can take on anything that comes my way. Rusty. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors was the next movie on the list. Having a group of teenagers trying to fight off Freddy Krueger was kind of poetic about what I was going through in my head. Except in my head, I was Freddy Krueger in the Dream Warriors where everybody ganging up on me. I know that wasn't fair to Gracie and my mom, but that's what I felt. I was watching the movie, but I was looking out the window every few minutes just to see if there was anything suspicious going on. Eventually, during the scene where Freddy multiplies himself in the mirrors, I looked down and one shadow had become 2 shadows. I took a picture of the best that I could, but once again due to the crappy quality of my phone, I couldn't capture anything resembling a shadow. My first thought was to instantly go wake my dad up to tell him about what I had seen, but I decided to keep this to myself like he suggested, and I was going to take care of it my own way. With my parents out of the house tomorrow, I'm sure that I could take care of this. The next morning, Dad began to pack for the seminar. My mother did too alongside him, pulling out her fanciest dresses and high heels as well as a pair of her Golden Goose sneakers. My dad had a closet full of suits and he just picked the best 3. I stood in the doorway watching them pack. Mom looked up at me and smiled as she walked over and booped my nose with her bracelet jiggling once again. "Rusty, your father and I are trusting you with Gracie in the house while we're gone this weekend. If there is anything that you need, call me. Your father will be too busy writing his speech and networking. I'm just there to be the eye candy," she said as she winked at me. She winked at me with a double meaning. The first meaning was to call her with any problem because Dad is emotionally unavailable. The second was because she knew that she was going to be the prettiest woman at a medical seminar. I just laughed and shook my head in acknowledgement. With a full suitcase, Dad walked past me and patted me on the shoulder. "Everything that your mother said goes. I'm just glad that you're not telling me about shadows in the backyard this morning," He rushed past me and loaded up the suitcase in the Tesla. Mom followed close behind him. Dad got in the car and right before Mom did the same thing. She looked at me and blew me a kiss before getting in. They drove off for the weekend. I mostly did the same routine until Gracie got home from school. We ordered pizza and watched Criminal Minds for hours. After a while, she passed out. I picked her up and put her in bed. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth before going to lay down to watch The Dream Master. However, while I was in there, I heard a crashing sound. I tried to leave the bathroom, but something or somebody was blocking the door. I could hear Gracie screaming across the hall as she was taken downstairs. I eventually was able to break the door down. I ran downstairs like my head was on fire, and I noticed that the kitchen door was wide open. I could still hear Gracie screaming outside. When I got outside, there was a tow truck connected to my grandpa's Cadillac, and both jet skis were attached to another tow truck. I went behind the garage, and their Gracie was tied to my workout bench. They had duct taped her mouth shut right next to the weights. And there was the shovel. I grabbed it and held it like a baseball bat. As soon as that happened, I could hear 2 sets of footsteps running towards me. Sure enough, the shadows were 2 men dressed in all black and ski masks. One of them approached me with a knife, and I took the shovel and cracked him right across the face. He was out cold. The other guy stopped dead in his tracks and rerouted towards the truck with my grandpa's Cadillac. As soon as he started the tow truck up, I took the shovel and punctured a hole in both back tires. Scared, he got out of the driver's seat and took off running. I untied Grace and called the cops, followed by my mother. I told her that there were 2 masked men that tied up Gracie and tried to take Grandpa's Cadillac and the jet skis from the garage. I could hear the terror in her voice as she relayed the message to my dad. She told me they would be on the next flight out, which is soon. She told me to hold tight and make sure that Gracie would be all right. As soon as I got off the phone with her, I noticed the guy I had knocked out was gone. Just then, I could hear an engine starting up. It was the tow truck with the jet skis, and he took off as fast as hell. I was so frustrated with myself that they got away with the jet skis. I was just happy that they didn't get Grandpa's Cadillac. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later. They had told me that they captured the tow truck with the jet skis, and they caught the other guy trying to steal another car a few houses down. The jet skis were returned back to the property, and both men were arrested. They showed me pictures of the men unmasked, and I didn't recognize either one of them. Guess they were just a couple of guys trying to score some fast cash. After questioning and all the other procedures, the police finally left. Gracie and I were just sitting on the steps of the back porch with blankets around our shoulders. After a couple of hours, Mom and Dad came home. Mom, still in her gown, ran up to me, heels be damned. Dad slowly got out of the car and walked up to me angrily. While Mom embraced me and Gracie and asked if we were all right, Dad was a different story. He burned a hole through me as he stared. I don't know where you had the balls to do what you did. Getting your sister involved is cowardly shit. I looked at him confused and didn't know what he was getting at. You had a couple of your junkie friends mask up, trying to steal expensive shit. Then you made it sound like a robbery. All of this just to get money for your next fix, isn't it? Mom was appalled as she stared at my dad and shook her head. How can you say that to him? He scared them off with a shovel. One of the guys lost a handful of teeth and suffered a concussion. Dad stared right back with venom and said, I don't care how it looks. I know what happened. Our son is an addict, and addicts will get super creative to get their next high. Dad stormed off into the house and slammed the back door. Mom shook her head, sighed, and followed him into the house. Grace just took my hand again and patted it. Thank you for being my hero, she said as she looked up at me. I looked down and kissed her on the forehead. Thank you for always believing in me. You're the absolute best. She smiled at me as she rested her head on my shoulder and fell asleep just as the sun was beginning to rise.
Clara, honey, why don't you go play with your tablet? I said that to my daughter to distract her every time something bad happens with my father. Anytime he yelled at me or hit me. I don't want my 6-year-old daughter to see it. Whitney, you stupid bitch. How the hell can you burn spaghetti sauce? My dad had just woken up from a drunk stupor after day drinking, chain smoking, and watching public broadcasting television. I just got off my shift at Family Dollar while he has been home all day. As I look over at Clara, she is luckily invested in Bluey on her tablet. Her headphones are on. I got the best noise-canceling ones I could get with my employee discount. They've been a real lifesaver as of late because my dad just keeps getting meaner and meaner as he gets older. Anytime I have a bad day or have a grievance about something, he always throws in my face that he was a war veteran and I had no room to complain. The one thing that I have to throw back at him I keep to myself, and that's that he was dishonorably discharged for conduct unbecoming. I just take a deep breath and swallow it. Dad clenches his black and yellowing teeth and tells me, "Fix your mistake." He then takes his hand occupied by a Bud Light bottle and points a finger at me, "Or I will fix mine." He always threatens me with that, practically daily. Thankfully, I had an extra jar of spaghetti sauce in the pantry. So I took the burned sauce and tossed it in the trash and started over. I would have hated to see what he would have done if I didn't have that jar. We live with my dad in a 2-bedroom apartment. He gets a room all to himself and I share mine with Clara. We're small enough to fit on a twin mattress. Clara goes right to sleep after dinner, and I just lie there in bed crying myself to sleep, like I do every night. I absorb all of the pain so that she will never know that a monster doesn't live under the bed. He lives in the next room. I woke up the next morning and prepared biscuits and gravy for all 3 of us. No mistakes this time, however. Dad didn't join us because he was up late watching a football game. So I left him a plate in the microwave, per usual. I walked Clara to school, which is 2 blocks over, and I walked to work about 6 blocks past the school. I feel more comfortable at work than I do at home these days. As I walked in, I bumped into a man and made him drop his bag of mini chocolate donuts. "I am so sorry," I said to him after I gasped. He just picked up his donuts. "No problem, I think my breakfast is safe." He shook it next to his ear as he smiled and walked out. Wanda, my manager, looked at me and shook her head. "Wow. That's the most interaction you've had with a man in forever." She joked at me and gave herself a belly laugh in the process. "Whatever" was all I could think up at the moment. I put my bag under the register and clocked in for the day. I immediately started stocking shelves, starting with the toiletries, and helped the occasional customer check out. I have a lot of alone time to think about the nights before my morning shift. Every day I try to do better, but Dad won't seem to let me improve. The rest of my shift went off really without anything exciting happening. One of my regular customers came in and bought another carton of cigarettes. A high school kid came in and bought his lunch, which consisted of a 100-gram chocolate bar and a bag of flaming hot Cheetos. The saddest thing was a young girl came in with tears in her eyes and shaking. She walked up to the counter and put down a single pregnancy test. I looked her in the eye, and she immediately hung her head in shame. I told her that I understood and that everything was going to be okay. I remember being that scared when I was pregnant with Clara. I disappeared for almost a year because if Dad knew I was pregnant, he would have beat her out of me. I finished up my shift and walked to Clara's school to pick her up. She came running out of the double doors and embraced me with a hug. She told me she drew a picture in class as she handed it to me. She told me that it was of me. It was a stick figure with curly brown hair and a red cape. Below it read, "Mommy is my hero." I started crying and squeezed her so tight. I'm surprised she didn't pop. She looked in my right hand and saw a plastic bag. "What's for dinner tonight, Mommy?" I told her I was making her favorite, sloppy joes. I try to feed it to her once a week because it makes her happy. It's all so easy when all I have to do is buy 2 cans and a pack of buns. I was praying that I wouldn't overcook dinner tonight like I did last night. As we walked up the steps to our apartment, I noticed that the front door was wide open. The front entrance was wet with an amber-colored liquid. Dad had smashed his Jack Daniels bottle, probably in a drunken state. I lifted up Clara and walked past the mess. I told her to go to her room and do her homework while I made dinner and cleaned up. As we walked by Dad's door, he was passed out on the floor beside his bed. He didn't quite make it. After shutting Clara's bedroom door, I walked in to see if he was still breathing. As I approached him, he shot up and immediately punched me in the jaw. "What the fuck did you wake me up for?" he said to me as he slowly rose to his feet. I was holding my jaw and wiped my bottom lip, but he had busted it. "I'm sorry, Dad. I was checking to see if you were still alive," I said to him like a cowardly little girl. "Shit, if I'm gonna die it's not gonna be because of something stupid like this," he said as he grabbed a bottle of beer off of the nightstand. He walked into the living room and sat in his recliner. "It's Thursday night football, and the Packers are on. Don't say a goddamn word to me until you've cooked my dinner," he said as he popped the recliner and pulled out a cigarette along with his lighter. I just nodded my head as I grabbed a dirty towel from the laundry to clean up his mess. After cleaning up his mess, I got right to cooking dinner. I have a lot of time to reflect when I cook. I would stir the sauce with one hand and hold my jaw with the other. He had really done a number on me this time. I believe that was my "I've had enough" moment. I quietly made dinner. The last thing I did was put the buns in the toaster. Once those were done, I made my dad a couple of sandwiches and took it to him at his seat. As I was handing him the plate, he looked down at it. "God damn it, sloppy joes again?" He scoffed at me as he looked up and said, "Bring me the ketchup." He liked to put on ketchup because he said it would improve the flavor. After using the rest of the ketchup bottle and throwing it across the room, he waved me off as if he was dismissing his servant. I went and got Clara, and we both sat at the dinner table and ate together. Dad rarely ever joined us, and if he did, he would fall asleep with food all over his face. He one time actually passed out so hard that he slammed his face into the plate and broke it in half. I wanted it badly to be hot soup, but it was just a mound of mashed potatoes. After doing the dishes, I went back into the living room and like clockwork, Dad was passed out in his chair. A half-lit cigarette was in one hand, an empty beer bottle in the other, and his face was covered in ketchup. I put the cigarette out and went to bed. As I laid there cuddling Clara, I knew that we could have a better life. I had to make the next move in the morning. When I woke up, I checked my phone for plane ticket prices. I just wanted to get as far away from Englewood as possible. I've heard great things about San Diego, so I figured Clara and I could use a little change of scenery and go there. The plane ticket just for myself was so expensive and I had to nix that idea. I looked through Facebook Marketplace to see if there was a decent price on a used car. They were all way too expensive. I started to sense a pattern as I felt defeat. Then it dawned on me that there were buses that go cross-country. I looked at the prices and they were a little steep. To go from Chicago to San Diego it was going to cost me over $500 just for myself. Even though Clara was small, she still counted as an additional seat, so it would be around $1,000 for us. I had saved up a little bit of money inside of my old jewelry box my mom gave me. When I counted it out, it was about $700. I was about $300 short. If I could pick up a side hustle or even work a couple of double shifts, I was sure I could afford it by the end of the week. I got ready for work and walked Clara to school. As I walked into work, Wanda noticed a look on my face. "Girl, you all right?" I wiped my eyes and told her I was all right. She had to have known that I was lying because she just stared at me without breaking eye contact. I took a deep breath and told her that I had finally had enough and that I was gonna take Clara and myself far away from this place. Wanda had a shocked look on her face. She had known that my dad was abusive, but not physically. I would usually cover up my bruises with makeup, or I would call in sick if it was too bad looking. Today, I didn't even feel like hiding it. As I turned my face towards Wanda, she saw the bruise on my jaw. She just shook her head angrily as she gave me a hug with tears in her eyes. After apologizing, she told me to go home. I told her that I would rather be at work because my father was home. She retracted her statement and let me stay. A week went by and it was finally payday. My paycheck was enough for me to secure Clara's bus ticket. Butterflies began to flap in my stomach, both from excitement and anxiety at the same time. I cashed my check and went home. When I got there, Dad was passed out in a recliner with Seinfeld blasting throughout the apartment. I picked Clara up and we quietly walked into the bedroom. I opened up my jewelry box and noticed that the money was gone. I immediately panicked and started searching the drawers to see if I had dropped it in there. During my mad scramble, I heard Dad get out of the chair and walk to the bedroom door. He stared at me and said, "I needed money for beer and cigarettes. So I took the cash that you had in the box." He took a swig of his beer and walked away. I was so furious I could have broken down into tears. However, I didn't want Clara to see me like that. So I told her to put on her headphones and watch Bluey. After she got settled, I went into the bathroom and quietly cried. I thought to myself that I was never going to get out of this situation. I made tacos for dinner. I didn't say a word to my father the entire time. The next morning I went into work with Clara. Since it was the weekend, I didn't want her to be home alone with Dad. So I would bring her to work on my Saturday shifts. Wanda kept her entertained, so I wasn't worried about that. I told Wanda about my dad stealing my money from my bedroom. She was furious and told me what a son of a bitch my dad was. I didn't disagree with her. She was 100% correct. Sundays were my days off, and I usually spent them cleaning up the chaos of the week from my dad. I would also spend time with Clara, whether it be doing a puzzle or drawing pictures. However, today I received a phone call from Wanda. She told me to meet her at the park. Clara liked the swing set and I could use some air that wasn't doused in liquor and smelled of smoke. So I agreed to meet her there. When we got there, I told Clara to go play on the swing set while Wanda and I sat on the bench and watched her. Wanda handed me a cup of coffee from Starbucks and began talking. "I'm really sorry that your dad took your money." After taking a sip of my caramel macchiato, I told her, "I appreciate it, I just have to be better at hiding it next time. Once I get the $1,100, I hate to leave you, but I'll be out of here." Wanda smirked at me as she reached into her purse. She handed me an envelope with my name on it. As I opened it, I saw a stack of cash. I gasped and looked at Wanda. She then said, "I got some of the girls from the store to pull in some cash for you. There's a little over $2,000 in that envelope. That should take care of your tickets and food for you and Clara. It's gonna take at least 3 days to get there, and we didn't want you to do it hungry." I want you to buy the tickets first thing in the morning. Y'all better leave as soon as possible tomorrow. Also, Whitney, you're fired." I couldn't help but start crying and give her a big hug. The next morning I acted like I was going to work and Clara was going to school. Dad was still sleeping, so I packed a bag that could fit as many clothes as possible. I took Clara and did a victory lap to the bus station. Clara was a little confused as to why she wasn't going to school that day. I had told her that we were leaving her grandpa and going to live by ourselves. Her confusion turned into excitement. Though she had never seen her grandpa be abusive towards me, I never wanted to paint him in a negative light for her. She said she was going to miss him and went along with what I said. When we got to the bus station, I bought the tickets and waited for our chariot to arrive. It was going to be a 3-day trip, but it was a 3-day trip that I was going to enjoy every second of the further we got from my father. As we were loading up the bus, I recognized somebody a few rows back. It was the donuts that gave it away. The guy from the store. He was wearing a blue hoodie with a Chicago Cubs hat. He recognized me too as he waved with a mouthful of donuts. He wiped his mouth and got up. He walked right over to me and said, "Hey, you're the lady that works at Family Dollar, right?" I laughed a little bit and told him that I quit and that I was moving my daughter and me to California. He said with a little bit of donuts still left in his mouth, "That's crazy, I'm doing the exact same thing." Glad to know we can have familiar faces on our journey. As he stuck his hand out, he said, "My name is Thomas." I shook his hand and introduced myself properly as well as my daughter. He went back to his seat and enjoyed the rest of his donuts. Thank God I got a bus that had Wi-Fi capability. Clara could watch videos on her tablet and I could read some books along the way on my phone. As the bus loaded up, the driver introduced himself and informed us our first few stops would be in the state of Illinois. He said he would take us to St. Louis where we would change drivers at a terminal. This was where we would get something to eat and use the restrooms if we needed to. However, the bus did contain a restroom if we needed to use it beforehand. He fastened his seatbelt and we took off. Leaving Chicago and watching it slowly get smaller was one of the greatest feelings I've ever experienced. After the first few stops to pick up other people and let some off, we had finally left the state. I felt a little easier after that realization. I must have finally been able to relax because I passed out until we got to St. Louis. Our driver said his goodbyes as we shifted to another and they gave us a little bit of a layover to get something to eat and stretch our legs. I overheard somebody mention that there was a McDonald's close by and Clara loved Happy Meals. So we didn't have to go too far. I got a double quarter pounder with cheese. As we sat down to eat our food in the restaurant, I looked over and saw Thomas eating something besides chocolate donuts for once. He was enjoying a 20-piece McNugget. I'm not sure what it was, but something told me to sit next to him, so I asked and he obliged. Man, you can't beat a McNugget dipped in sweet and sour sauce, Thomas said once again with his mouth full. I just giggled and said,
"Yeah,
I'm more of a double quarter pounder with cheese girl myself," as I pointed to my food. He wiped his mouth and admitted that that was his second choice, and that because the McNuggets were weird shapes they tasted better as shapes. The weirdest part was I actually agreed with him. With Clara playing with her Happy Meal toy, Thomas and I just sat there and talked about Chicago, different life experiences, and what we hoped for the future. I had to leave Chicago because there was nothing of value there for me anymore. After my mom passed away, that was the only thing tethering me to the city, Thomas said with a little bit of sadness in his throat. I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas. I had to leave because of my father. He was very abusive towards me. Luckily, he never did anything to my daughter," I said, as I looked over at Clara with her headphones on watching Bluey and playing with her toy. Thomas had an even sadder look on his face. "I'm sorry to hear that. I know this is strange, but can I give you a hug?" After everything we had been through in our own lives, I decided it wouldn't hurt. I got up and he shot up and we embraced. It felt warm, sincere, and for the first time in a long time, safe to be touched by a man. We decided that we better hurry and get back to the bus before it left without us. No offense to St. Louis, but if the Rams left, then there's probably nothing cool here," Thomas said as he winked at me. We got back on the bus and the seat right across from me had cleared, so Thomas sat across from me the entire way to Oklahoma City. We talked the entire time. "I'm gonna take a nap now, Mommy. You and Tommy's conversations are boring," Clara said to me at one point. It may have been boring to my child, but to me it was a genuine human connection. When he got up to use the restroom, I texted Wanda and informed her that the donut guy from the store was on the bus with me. She thought it was an awesome coincidence and that it might have been fate that brought us together. Our next stop was Amarillo, Texas. We were able to get up and stretch once again. Thomas told me he Googled restaurants nearby and thought a place called Braceros sounded good. It was a local Mexican food restaurant on 6th Street. Tacos did sound good and Clara loves chips and cheese, so the queso would be right up her alley. So I agreed to sit and eat with him. "I just want chips and cheese, Mommy," Clara said to me as soon as we walked in. I called it. Thomas got the enchiladas and I got the tacos. Clara was scarfing down the chips and queso like it was going to fly away. We had more in-depth conversations about our lives. Thomas was a former school teacher who was let go due to budget cuts. That's why he was going to California to see if he could find a better job. As he took a bite of his enchiladas, a little bit of the red sauce dripped down his chin. "Look, Mommy, Tommy looks like a vampire," Clara said as she chuckled with a mouthful of chips and cheese. I couldn't help but almost snort my iced tea out of my nose. I laughed so hard. I went to grab my money and Thomas gave the waiter his credit card before I even had a chance. I just rolled my eyes and thanked him for dinner. He told me it was his pleasure as he shot a smile at me. The butterflies were awake again. We slowly watched the flat plains of West Texas become mountainous on our way to our next stop in Albuquerque. It's incredible how the atmosphere changes on a trip like this. Thomas did not leave my side until we left Albuquerque. We had gotten out to stretch our legs and to grab something to eat together. When we got back, there was somebody that had purchased the seat that he was sitting in. He of course got up like he was supposed to and went back to his original seat, which was about 5 rows behind me. I was a little saddened because I couldn't see his face anymore, but I was really happy to have him on the bus with me for comfort. For the first time the entire trip I really needed to use the restroom. I could usually wait until we got to our next destination, however I couldn't make it to Tucson. Clara was asleep in her seat and Thomas was on his phone. As I left my seat I walked past Thomas and smiled at him and asked him to watch Clara while I used the restroom. He said he would be happy to and told me not to fall in. I laughed harder on this bus ride than I had in years, and it was all thanks to Thomas. I opened the restroom door and what I saw next chilled me to the bone. "You thought you could have gotten rid of me, didn't you, bitch?" My father was standing in the restroom doorway and he had a gun in his right hand. It was a pistol that he had in his possession since the war. All I could do was stand there and cry. "Go back to your seat. Tell Clara to put on her headphones and watch her tablet, and get your ass back to me." As I sniffled going back to my seat, I looked at Thomas, who had a worried look on his face. I walked up to my seat and woke up Clara. "Honey, put on your headphones and watch Bluey for me." Clara rubbed her eyes and did what she was told. I then walked back toward the restroom and Thomas looked at me and said, "Whitney, are you all right?" All I could do was shake my head no at him. When I got back to the restroom, my dad cocked his gun and told me to slowly go back to my seat. He walked behind me as he stuck it in my back. "I've been following you too since Springfield. The man at the bus station had no spine and gave you up after one punch to the nose." The terror that washed over me felt like it would never come off. He had been following us for practically the entire trip and I was oblivious to it. I left my truck back in Albuquerque. Some idiot gave me $500 for it right on the spot. That's about the price of your ticket. I could have just used the money that I stole from you, but decided against it. Each word that came out of his mouth had more and more venom attached to it. We walked back to our seat and right as I sat down he sat in the seat behind me and pointed the gun at the back of my head. I closed my eyes and said a little prayer. As soon as that happened, I heard a voice boom from the back of the bus. "Chicago PD, drop the gun." I turned around to see Thomas standing in front of his seat with a pistol pointed at my dad. "Drop the gun, you stupid bastard." My dad raised his hands as if he was about to comply. Right as he was about to drop the gun, he fired a shot at Thomas and ducked under the seat. Luckily, the bullet missed Thomas and shot out one of the windows. The bus driver screeched to a halt in the middle of the Arizona desert. Thomas emerged from under his seat and slowly crouched towards my dad. Once my dad was in his line of sight, they started wrestling. Dad had flung his gun across the bus and Thomas was trying to point his own gun at my dad as the struggle happened. Thomas was punched in the jaw by Dad. He then dropped his gun as it slid along the floor of the bus. My dad got in a couple more hits, one to Thomas's ribs and another to his nose. Thomas then put my dad in a headlock and told him to stop resisting. With all of his strength, my dad lifted Thomas off the ground and threw him over his shoulders onto the floor. Dad quickly scrambled back to his gun and grabbed it. Right as he was about to pull the trigger, I said to my dad, "Hey, Dad." As he turned around, he noticed that I had his gun in my hand as I unloaded the clip into his chest. I immediately dropped the gun afterwards and looked over to Clara, who had slept through the entire thing. I walked over to check on Thomas to see if he was all right. Out of breath and wincing, he managed to say, "Thanks." He slowly stood up and wiped the blood off of his nose. He then embraced me with a hug. We exited the bus and waited for first responders to arrive. I picked up Clara and walked her quickly past her grandpa's body on the ground. She was still asleep. When we stepped outside, the cool desert breeze at night woke her up. "Are we there, Mommy?" she asked in a sleepy voice. "No, honey, we had to make another pit stop. We'll be there eventually, you can go back to sleep." Clara once again did what she was told and went back to sleep. I looked over at Thomas and asked him, "So is your name even Thomas?" He looked at me and told me, "No. My name is Henry. Thomas is my middle name." "I have another confession to make," he said as he dabbed his nose with a paper towel. "I work for the Chicago Police Department. I had been reading your file about the multiple times that you called into the station. Your worries were either ignored, made fun of, or had no follow-through. I took it upon myself to make sure that you were safe. I used some of my vacation time to make this trip with you to be sure that you and Clara made it to San Diego in one piece." I was stunned and didn't know how to respond. A part of me was grateful that he was there. Otherwise, I would have probably been dead. The other part of me was angry because he lied to me. Everything I said to you besides my name was true. Every story, every gesture, and even the part where I like McNuggets because shapes do in fact taste better. I couldn't help but smile and accept the truth. I thanked him again as I hugged him around the neck. He winced, but he accepted it. I pulled back and began to kiss him as I heard the sirens approaching our bus.